Hey folks, this is Yuri Karasawa with Japan Ball. 12 NPB team previews in 12 days. Today it is time for the Tokyo Yakult Swallows, a team that made the Japan series in back-to-back years from 2021 to 2022, but have been tied for last place over the past two seasons. So last year they were 62, 77, and 4. They had an OPS plus of 96 and an ERA plus of 88. Remember, 100 is always league average, so they were quite a bit below average in both. And then they also had a negative 81 defensive runs saved, so one of the worst defensive units in all of NPB. But what do they do over the offseason to improve? Their notable additions include Peter Lambert, Mike Bowman, and Pedro Avila in terms of the foreign imports. All right-handed pitchers. Lambert should be able to slide into the rotation. You know, his MLB numbers don't look great, but he was pitching in Colorado, so you obviously have to account for that. I think his stuff should be decent enough to have a bottom of the rotation type role in NPB. Mike Bowman is a guy that set an MLB record last year when he pitched for like 5 or 6 different teams in the same season. He can definitely be a high leverage arm, throws hard, has a nice death ball off of it. So definitely expect him to potentially even establish himself as the setup man or the closer down the line. And then Avila was a bit of a later signing, actually very decent numbers in MLB last year with the Cleveland Guardians, but he definitely has a shot to make the rotation as well. Then they got Yasaki, kind of a lower leverage reliever in the active player draft from the Hiroshima Carp, and they signed Agoro Mogi as a free agent. Former all-star third baseman with the Rakuten Eagles. Didn't really have much of a role left on that team, but on this team, you can be kind of a backup to Munetaka Murakami, and obviously once Murakami's gone, he very well may become the starting third baseman. Notable subtractions, Cy Snead was there for many years, going back to, you know, when they were making the Japan series. He is gone now. Miguel Yahure, they brought in last year. He was okay in the rotation. He's now with the Rakuten Eagles. Elvin Rodriguez, a guy that ended up becoming the closer for this team down the stretch and did a really good job at it. He ended up going to the Milwaukee Brewers on a major league deal. Jose Espada, kind of a lower leverage reliever, is out the door. And then the big one, Nori Aoki, he has retired. At this point in his career, 42 years old, he was basically just a bench bat, kind of a clubhouse veteran presence, but still, it's going to be a new look for this team without him there in the dugout. 2024 NPB Draft, I think the Swallows actually did a really good job addressing their needs. First round, they get Yuto Nakamura, a power pitcher out of Aichi Tech, one of the best pitching prospects in recent years. And the Swallows are the only team in NPB who don't have anyone that can throw over 97 miles per hour. They didn't have a single pitcher with a pitch over 97 miles per hour last season. So Yuto Nakamura, he's a guy that can run it up to 100 miles per hour. So already a huge addition for them to bring in an arm like Nakamura who can eventually join the rotation. I think he's currently dealing with an injury, but I think he's going to be very special once he gets there. Nikita Moisev in the second round, also from Aichi. He's a high schooler, an ethnic Russian outfielder, a guy that won't be helping the team in 2025, but maybe 3-4 years down the line, you can definitely dream on him becoming a superstar. And then Kota Shoji in the third round, also pretty interesting, a left-handed relief pitcher from corporate ball, so a little bit older, more NPB ready, honestly, has a pretty nasty changeup, so I think he can already play a role in the bullpen somewhere. 2024 hitting leaders, minimum 100 plate appearances. You see that Domingo Santana was their best hitter last year with a 165 OPS plus, 17 homers in 122 games. Santana has been one of the best foreign imports over the past half decade in NPB, in an era where a lot of foreign hitters are struggling to produce. Santana has had no problems. Not the best outfielder defensively, but a guy that you can put anywhere in the middle of your lineup and is going to rake. You also see his Latin friend Jose Osuna at first base. He had a 116 OPS plus last year. He's also been there since The same time Santana joined back in 2021, a big part of how this team kind of got over the hump and made it to the Japan Series those years. He doesn't have the same peaks as Santana, but pretty consistently above average, in terms of the hitting production. And then sandwiched between them was Munetaka Murakami, of course, with a 149 OPS plus, 33 homers. He did not miss a single game, so, he definitely posts and he plays all the time. 10 stolen bases as well, so a little bit of sneaky speed there. But obviously, Murakami these past 2 years has not been able to reach the heights that he showed in 2022 when he hit 56 home runs and he had an OPS plus in the 230 range. So he had an absolutely historic season and looked like one of the best young sluggers in NPB history. But these past 2 years, the strikeout rate has just skyrocketed up to 30%. He's still very good, don't get me wrong. The floor is incredibly high with him because he has a great eye. He gets on base, and he still, when he gets hot, is going to put, a lot of balls over the fence in a short period of time. But, if the Swallows really want to get back to where they were in 2021 and 2022, him bouncing back to at least a maybe like a 170, 180 OPS plus is going to be very important. And then the other thing with this team over the past few years has just been the inability to stay healthy. You got guys like Yasutaka Shiomi, Tetsudo Yamada, who at their best are all-star caliber players who just haven't been able to stay on the field. Shiomi is an excellent defensive center fielder. He can run, he can hit for power, great leadoff bat, reduced to 31 games last year with an ACL injury. Tetsudo Yamada, before Murakami came along, he was the face of this franchise. MVP season in 2015, a guy who was just consistently hitting 300, 30 bombs, 30 swipes, 100 RBI, you name it. His offense has definitely begun to regress as Father Time catches up to him, but, still one of the most talented players in recent NPB history, so maybe a bounce back is possible. Hideki Nagaoka actually had a great year out of the shortstop position last year. He's certainly looking like one of the best all-around shortstops in NPB at this point. And then Yuhei Nakamura, a veteran catcher who's just an excellent defensive backstop and kind of in a leadership role there. Not much of a hitter, but obviously he was there behind the plate to finish off the WBC with Shohei Ohtani on the mound, so a guy that can kind of solidify this team as well. 2024 pitching leaders, minimum of 30 innings pitched. The problem with the Swallows always is that they just don't really have much starting pitching. It isn't until you get to Yasunobu Okugawa and Kojiro Yoshimura here that you get to starting pitchers. Everyone else is a reliever here in the top 10 range, and they play at Meiji Jingu Stadium, which is a massive hitter's park, so that definitely makes it harder for the pitchers to consistently put up good numbers, but they just don't really have much depth. And so you have a couple of solid relief pitchers, sure, in Shota Maruyama, Hiroki Onishi. Those guys were honestly pitching in slightly lower leverage roles, so the numbers are a bit inflated, but even the relief pitching core, and guys like Reiji Kozawa, Kazuto Taguchi, Naofumi Kizawa, they're good, but they're not really elite. So the pitching is definitely a big weakness for this team. When they made the Japan Series back in 2021, it was heavily carried by Okugawa and Keiji Takahashi. Okugawa was in his rookie season at the time. This is a guy who at one point was a prospect touted almost on a similar level to Roki Sasaki, not necessarily with the 100-mile-per-hour fastball like he had, but with, absolutely superb command for a teenager. And then Keiji Takahashi, kind of with an effectively wild approach. They paired extremely well, but these past few years, they've both been very inconsistent, especially Okugawa being injured and rarely taking the mound. So, how does this team's depth chart look for the upcoming season? Let's begin at catcher, where you do have Yuhei Nakamura there. Like I said, kind of a dependable defense-first veteran. Matsumoto there as a backup, also a good defender. And then Soma Uchiyama was banged up last year, so he missed time, but a young kind of utility man. I kind of liken him to a Dalton Varsho in MLB. He can also play the outfield. First base will be Jose Osuna. He can be very hot and cold, but at the end of the day, he's putting up solid offensive numbers. Second base will be Tetsudo Yamada, so long as he is healthy. But they do have some younger guys there like Akego Kitamura that can step in. And then, of course, they signed Egoro Mogi. Third base, Munetaka Murakami, he's not the best defender there at the hot corner, but you don't really care as long as he is hitting tanks. Shortstop, Hideki Nagaoka. So honestly, the infield is pretty solid, at least offensively. Outfield, Domingo Santana in left, Yasutaka Shiomi in center, and then a top prospect in Ren Sawai there in right field. Should be able to take that next step and produce at the NPB level this year. A guy who has hit 25, 30 bombs now over the past few seasons on the farm. Hasn't really shown anything at the top level yet. But if he is able to break out, then offensively, this team has no problem. Haruki Nishikawa, kind of a veteran there, was once a great player with the Nippon Ham Fighters, an on-base machine. He is at the tail end of his career, but he's there as a nice fourth outfield option. You also have guys like Maruyama and Namiki, who are incredibly fast and good defenders. So a little bit of depth there as well. But really the main question is, can, the superstars like Yamada and Shiomi and Santana stay healthy? Because if they can, then again, they shouldn't have problem putting runs on the board. The main issue is going to be with the pitching. So Kojiro Yoshimura last year, nice breakout season for him, able to establish himself as the ace. I still think he needs another year to kind of prove himself as, being a true ace, being the reliable number one, but definitely showed a lot of promise last season. Keiji Takahashi, like I said, he's a bit volatile, he's a bit up and down, but when he's on, he can be unhittable. So that's a solid 1-2 punch at the top. Yuto Nakamura, their first round pick from last year, if he clicks, is going to be electric. So then you have a pretty solid front three. But the back of the rotation definitely has a lot of question marks. Okugawa, had another injury scare earlier in the spring. He is, healthy and pitching now, but he always kind of feels like a ticking time bomb when it comes to that arm injury. Avila and Lambert, I think, are solid, but we, haven't seen them in NPB yet, so we'll see what they can do. A couple of other veterans there, like Hirotoshi Takanashi, Yasuhiro Ogawa, that can eat innings. One of them will probably be sliding into the back of the rotation. And then a few youngsters in Kengo Matsumoto and Taichi Yamano. Not the best success yet at the top level, but guys that definitely have a little bit of prospect pedigree. Matsumoto actually threw a complete game shutout in his NPB debut last year, so that was definitely a really exciting beginning to his career. Bullpen, this is one of the few teams that I don't think the closer role is honestly decided at this point. Naofumi Kizawa probably has the most upside. He is a former top prospect, and he's been solid in a setup role these past few years. Reiji Kozawa, kind of more of a swingman, but he did get quite a few saves last year, so he is also going to factor in there. Mike Bowman, who I mentioned, big kind of power reliever. He can step in and be good. Kazuto Taguchi, 2 years ago, transitioned really well into that closer role. But last year he was kind of injured and didn't really do much. He's also a lefty, and obviously a lot of teams prefer to have a righty in the ninth inning. And then the other guys are just kind of more lower leverage guys. Maruyama, Onishi, they had very good years last year in terms of the run prevention, but they have to prove it in bigger roles. Tomoya Hoshi, probably the hardest thrower here outside of Bowman. So yeah, they have some okay pieces, but there definitely isn't enough in the sense of like the high-end, high-caliber arms that you can absolutely rely on are going to shove game in and game out. So the Swallows' outlook for 2025, a lot of people are going to want to buy into this kind of fairy tale romance of Munetaka Murakami going out with a bang, one last hurrah, getting them back to the promised land. But a lot of this is going to depend on the health of their offense and whether or not a few of these kind of question marks in the rotation and bullpen can take a big step forward. We have seen it happen before. 2021, they won the Japan Series. Everything kind of went right for that team. But when everything goes wrong, like it did in 2023 and 2024, it can kind of crumble really quickly, and they're going to be closer to a last place team. So I think they're going to be very competitive, but they are definitely lacking in quite a few key areas. So let's see what happens to the Yakult Swallows in 2025.